Good morning, and a good morning it is. I hope it feels like one there. It feels bright inside today, not just outside. I hope that's how you're feeling today. Just seeing if we can include our friends on Facebook here, as we try to do on a daily basis. Takes just a moment to do so. There we go, getting ourselves together. And it's almost time for us to begin. It's nice to have an opportunity to Boker Tov one another today, as 8:30 almost comes around and we take this time. The month of Iyar is a good month. It started just on this Shabbat, and it's a nice opportunity, a nice feeling for us to share these moments together in the morning. Well, Boker Tov all, and welcome to Sinai streams, to Boker Tov from Temple Sinai, an opportunity each day from Temple Sinai in Toronto for all of us to have a chance to connect, to reflect, and remember. And this morning, it being Yom Sheni, the second day, that full name of that is Yom Sheni b'Shabbat, because among the 6 things we remember every day as we think of the gift that Shabbat is each and every day, that the second day of the week, Monday, is one of our days where we chant Torah. And so this morning, we look again at our double parashah. This is 2 weeks in a row where we have 2 weekly Torah portions, 2 parashiot to read from. Last week, that being the parashah known as Tazria Metzora, and this week, that being Achrei Mot Kedoshim. It is amazing how the Jewish calendar is so interconnected that, as I share with you this morning, I can feel the holidays coming in the fall. Right, this is a new Jewish year. There are 4 different Jewish New Years, and one of which, of course, is the beginning of Nisan, last month, the first month of the year. And so all of the days that are coming, as far as managing the calendar are interconnected. And so part of the reason that we have 2 weeks in a row where we read 2 Torah portions and not 1 is because the fall holidays, the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, Rosh Hashanah, and the beginning and ending of Sukkot, all fall this year on Shabbat. And so because we have those weeks where we won't be reading a weekly parashah, since there are only certain Torah portions that can be combined during the year, it reaches all the way back to us here in April, so that we can already feel September. And I have to admit, of late, I've been thinking not just about the days that we're in today, but about those days, those times, and especially those holidays to come. More about that another day. But today being a day where we read from Torah, we're going to, just like we did last week, we're going to take some time this morning to consider some verses from Parashat Achrei Mot. And on Thursday, some learnings from Parashat Kedoshim. Achrei Mot is known for many things, some of them which we continue to echo and be strongly influenced by, like at the beginning of our parasha. It talks about the biblical and temple-based ritual of Yom Kippurim, of the Day of Atonement, of our most sacred holiday. And some of the rituals of that are still recalled and chanted and repeated every day, every year on Yom Kippur. And the whole concept of scapegoats And scapegoating seems to reach back, at least in naming, to that description in that parasha. Likewise, this week's Torah portion contains a list of forbidden sexual relationships. It talks about the issues of the relationship between sex and power and holiness. Very important, and because they're so ancient, very challenging texts that we all should and must wrestle with today, and that I have at some length. But today, I want to focus on the beginning of chapter 18 from the book of Leviticus. I want to share it up here on the screen with you because it contains some words that receive a little less attention, but have some very important and basic things to say. First of all, about the different elements of Jewish tradition, and second of all, about the way our ethics have grown and evolved together with a growing and evolving and living Torah that we're privileged to have and share. So here we find chapter 18 of the book of Leviticus. You'll see that we're at verse 4. Verse 1 to 3 talk about not copying the actions of other nations, of the Egyptians who we were enslaved by for so many centuries, or those pagan nations that lived in the land of Canaan, the land to be Israel, that was then. And that's why in the translation of verse 4, even though we don't find it in the literal Hebrew words here, it says, "Not my rules shall you observe, but my rules alone." That word is a leftover from the verses before, because clearly in context, there's a contrast, and that part of Torah's context originally is not merely uniquely and eternally saying, here are the abstract principles of the Jewish people, but even in times of Torah, even in this chapter, and throughout the history of our people, there's been, of course, an interaction and awareness of our difference from the world around us, and our need to be different, and how that should be reflected in actions is brought forward in very significant ways in verse 4 and 5 that I want to read the Hebrew as well as the English too. Verse 4 says that Mishpatai ta'asu v'et chukotai tishma'u lalechet bahem, ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall do my judgments and observe my laws, to walk in them or to go in them, I, the eternal, your God. First of all, this verse, while semi-poetic because of the parallelism, is understood by our tradition to talk about two different categories. And while there are lots of readings of this verse, I'm following Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, of 11th and early 12th century France, our most influential, really, and best known commentator. I would say I'm following his reading of the verse, where it says, you should do my, it's translated as rules, but a mishpat is a judgment. And what he says, again, quoting earlier Midrash, is that these are the aspects of Jewish tradition that, as he says in words of one syllable in his commentary, that if they weren't in Torah anyway, we would have to come up with them and do them anyway. These are the mitzvot sichliot. These are the intellectual, the logical, the moral and sensible mitzvot, practices, rules, commandments that we find in Torah. And when we think of the 10 Commandments, a number of those, of course, such as thou shalt not murder and thou shalt not steal, are such obvious category, such obvious mitzvot, among so many others, that fit into this rule. Those things that if we sat down and engaged our moral reasoning, we would come up with anyway. And so it's very important that we observe those mitzvot. Continuing on, at chukotai tishmeru, you shall guard or look after my laws. Chukim, a law that is a chuk, is understood by our rabbinic tradition quite clearly to be the more ritual commandments. The example that Rashi gives in his commentary, the classic example is not eating pork, because the rule, as we find it in Torah, is not about logic and it's not about health, even though there may have been and continue to be some health benefits for a number of eating choices. The idea that we should limit how we eat or a number of different ritual aspects of our life, those elements are called chukim. And so Jewish tradition is made up simultaneously of those things that are logical and those things that are beyond logic. And that in fact, the realm of holiness comes from the willingness to struggle equally with and equally combine the two. Lalechet behen doesn't only mean to go along with them or to follow them, right? But the name for what eventually came to be known as Jewish law is halacha, from the same root as lalechet, as the way to go. And I really believe that in the earlier times, even after Torah, in the early rabbinic times, halacha was the public way for the community to observe, that there was, especially in those times, an understanding that different schools would look at things in different ways, that different individuals would practice it different ways, but because Judaism focuses on the community and says the community is holier than any individual, that we need a way that brings us together, and that is what halacha in earlier writings meant, rather than some kind of formal legal formulation. So that gives us a sense of what's included in Jewish tradition. Verse 5 is so important in the evolution of that tradition and the awareness that it does evolve. It says, "Ushmartem et chukotai v'et mishpatai asher ya'aseh otam." You shall regard my laws and my judgments, repeats the two words over again, so that you will do them. Asher ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai b'hem, that a person, that a human, that a mortal, depending on how we understand the word Adam, that a person should do them and live by them. I am the eternal. So yes, it sounds just like a continuation, but remember that in biblical tradition, there are many, many commandments, including ritual commandments. Shabbat in its way is both a logical or ethical commandment and a ritual commandment, sort of combined all in one, the ultimate commandment. And according to Torah, if one violates Shabbat, the punishment is death. Now, we all know that Jewish traditional practice for many, many, many centuries has been that if we have to choose between observing Shabbat in a ritual, in a legal and formal and strict way, and we have to choose between that and protecting someone's life, not merely actively saving it, that we err in the direction of what's come to be known as pikuach nefesh, as looking after that person's vitality, that person's life, that person's soul. But Torah seems to have a very different perspective, and there are even hints in early rabbinic literature that it wasn't so clear. And this verse becomes essential, that it's understand to say, observe my laws and do my judgment in a way that a person might live by them. As it says in the Talmud on page 85 in Tractate Yoma, 85b, I believe, it says, "V'chai behem shelo yamut behem," that you need to observe them in a way that you live by them and not die because of them. That you should miss a Shabbat so that you should live and be present to observe many, many Shabbatot. Is that the early and clear meaning of Torah? It doesn't logically seem to be. But our Torah, as we understand it, continues to live and breathe and grow with us. So while in a much earlier formulation, in the days of Torah itself, in a society that engaged in animal sacrifice and included the economic reality of slavery, there was a time that it could evolve. That likewise, ethics in that time may have been different, especially about the value of each and every human life. And so from this verse in our weekly Torah portion, we find, first of all, that it says Adam, which doesn't refer to Jewish individuals. It refers to all individuals. That word is an inclusive word of all humanity. And that, again, evolution is very significant, as is the idea that we say, wow, how can we put anything above a human life? Human life is not the ultimate and not the only ultimate value. Judaism, in its ethical structure, warns against fundamentalism, which I would define as taking one fundamental principle and saying it's the only one that matters. And that leads to very dangerous things, and human behavior always has, and in my opinion, always will. And yet, clearly, one of the essential elements of the Jewish moral reasoning, and many different elements of human moral reasoning, but essentially in our Jewish tradition, is to protect our lives and to see that human life is a strong positive value that all of us find ways to live and affirm. Maybe that's part of why it is that during this time where we're all too aware of threats to our lives that exist at all times, but that are so keenly felt because right now we're living in this time of this viral outbreak, that in fact we do say daily during this time our prayer for refuah, our prayer for strength and healing, and we have in mind those who are sick with COVID, those who are sick, struggling, or afflicted in any way, and in addition, of course, all those who themselves are doing what is necessary, doing what they are called to do to enable the rest of us to stay safe. All of our frontline workers of all kinds, they're all in our prayers as we turn to these traditional words. Mishiberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak v'Yaakov v'imotenu Sarah Rivka Leah v'Rachel hu yirapeh et kol makotenu yiratzon milfanech Adonai Eloheinu v'hachalimam u'lerapotam v'shlach lanu mehera refuah shlema v'ateret shalom v'nomar Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless and heal all who suffer. May it be the divine will to provide healing and strength. Reveal to us the holiness of life, the wholeness of shalom. And together we say, Amen. And so we now turn to our moment of memory for all of us who need it, and in particular for the Temple Sinai community, as we remember all those who've died in recent days and weeks, those who died at this season in years past, as well as those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. During the last 30 days, we extend our condolences to the families of Sidney Burns, Ann Williamson, Henry Schneider, Gloria Victor, Dorothy Besser, Harvey Leopold, Lauren Barsky, Hannah Glatter, Ruth Kelman. And we also remember all 22 victims of the mass shooting in Nova Scotia. It is also our sad duty to report the death of our member, Marcia Mason, wife of Jim and mother of Jeremy, sister of Stephen Wise, Andrea Pollock, and Michael Wise. Her funeral will take place graveside today at 3 p.m. at Pardes Chaim Cemetery, Temple Sinai section. And on Yort site this day, on the anniversaries of their deaths, on the 3rd of Iyar, on the 27th day of the month of April, we remember Shelley Blidner, Martin Bornstein, Jenny Cabot, Evelyn Cohen, Samuel Krakauer, Bernard Dennis, Frida Glixman, Judah Goldberg, Isidore Goldstein, Annette Gallant, Robert Bernard Galsoff, Violet Goodman, Benjamin Grossman, Brina Minnie Bellman Harris, Rose Kopatowski, Anne Corrine, Joyce Kossman, Joseph Croft, Chaim Yona Martin, Al Miller, Hudi Newman, Sylvia Silver. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing to us. Our griefs and sympathies are mingled as we take them and all who are in our hearts with us in memory today into our prayers as we turn to these words that are sanctified by memory, these words glorified by hope. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabba, be'alma divarach irute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon u'b'yomechon u'b'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kari v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Shemei dekudesha b'reichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. And a source of peace and peace to all who mourn and bring comfort and strength to all who remember. And together we say, Amen. A reminder as we make our way now to the third of Iyar, it means that coming tonight is Yom HaZikaron, Israel's day of memorial for fallen soldiers and victims of terror. And that means the following evening and day, of course, is the 5th of Iyar, is Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. And so just a reminder of so many ways to join with us in marking those moments. That tonight at 7:30 p.m., as part of all of our Sinai Streams offerings, Larry Englander will be offering a 1-hour study reflection section in honor of all those who are remembered on Yom HaZikaron, 7:30 p.m. You can find the link on our website. As a meaningful way to start Yom HaZikaron. Tomorrow morning at our 8:30 Sinai Streams, I look forward to being joined by Cantor Sharon Brown-Levy, and the two of us are really excited to be joined by Lihi Klein, our Shinshanit, our female volunteer from Israel, who of course is back in Israel, but thanks to the wonders of technology can still be with us. And so she'll be talking meaningfully and very personally tomorrow morning about Yom HaZikaron and its reality in Israel at our normal 8:30 time. Please join us for that. Tomorrow evening at 6:30 p.m., we will have our transition ceremony led by Rabbi Shaner from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut, from the price for independence to the joy and incredible nature of Jewish self-determination and independence. And then on Wednesday morning, Cantor Osborne will be sharing a very special and musical Yom HaAtzmaut 8:30 a.m. stream, joined as he will be by Elad Azrieli, our Shinshin, our other Israeli young emissary volunteer. We look forward to you being with us at those times and many times. In the meantime, make it a great day.